Hello my writerly friends, I'm Victoria, author and editor, and today I want to talk to you a little bit about some common mistakes that I see in the first few pages, the first chapter of a manuscript. Now this information is coming from my developmental edits and from my experience with REVPIT, which is a contest that writers can enter to win free editing on their manuscript. Unfortunately, I'm not participating in the main REVPIT contest this year. I just didn't have time, and of course my regular clients have to come first. But I am participating in the February mini contest, which is an opportunity for writers to get feedback on their queries. This Friday, February 15th, I will be tweeting using the hashtag 10queries and hashtag REVPIT. I'll be tweeting about 10 queries and sample pages that I received from the winners. And this is really beneficial for everybody following along, not just the winners, because a lot of queries and first pages have the same mistakes, the same weaknesses. So following along, you will probably see something that is applicable to your submission materials as well. So I highly recommend checking that out. My tweets will be from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m., but there are a ton of awesome editors that are going to be tweeting all day, so keep an eye on that. Okay, moving on to 5 common mistakes that I see in the first chapter of a manuscript. Number 1 is beginning too soon. This is really common, it's really easy to do. Especially in the first draft, we think, okay, we're gonna start at the beginning. But the beginning is not always the best place to start. Remember that we want to begin in medias res, which is Latin for in the middle of things. Starting too early can be boring, and it leads to some other related issues, such as my second issue, which is too much exposition. When you start too early, you have a tendency to throw in all this exposition, telling about your characters, telling about your setting, and that is not interesting. That's something that readers are going to skip over. And one of our main goals is to leave out the parts that people skip. So I do want to say about the first issue, which is starting too early, this happens a lot in drafts, and that's okay. It's fine to start too early in your draft. Sometimes you need to do that to get at the meat of the story. Remember, in the drafting stage, you are just trying to get the story down. But when you're editing, pay attention to that. Ask yourself, did I start in the right place? Did I start in the most interesting place, the place that is going to hook the reader and make them want more? So jumping back to the second issue, too much exposition. Exposition dumps are something we want to avoid altogether. That's not something that we need in our manuscript. Again, it's something people are going to skip. So rather than telling all of this backstory, all of this information, even all of this information about your character's appearance, leave that out. Leave that out. If you find yourself telling information as you would tell a friend sitting down to coffee, that's not what we're looking for. Try to incorporate that information in action. Rather than telling us the character's hair was blonde, show us the blood streaking your character's blonde hair. But rather than stepping out of the story to tell us that information, try to keep us in the story and weave it in organically. Okay, number 3 is no conflict. We need to see conflict right from the very start. Ideally, on the first page, we need some sort of conflict. If you're not able to get your main conflict in the first chapter, then there needs to be some sort of mini conflict, something to hook the reader, something to make them say, ooh, what's gonna happen? Is this going to work out for this main character? Remember, conflict is absolutely the most interesting thing about your story. And I use the word interesting to mean it is the thing that is going to make the reader keep reading. And when push comes to shove, that is what we want. If the reader puts your book down, then it doesn't matter how beautiful your setting is. It doesn't matter how well your prose flows. If the reader puts your book down, it's over. That's it. That's the end of the line. So first chapter, first page, ideally, have some conflict. And quick refresher, conflict means the character wants something and something else is in the way. We have a tendency to forget how simple this can be, because it's not simple when you're working on it, when you're writing, when you're editing. Sometimes it seems like the most difficult thing in the world. But when you're looking at your work objectively and trying to make it better, just keep it simple. Think about things in the easiest terms that you can. Don't make things more difficult for yourself. So conflict, character wants something, something else is in the way. All right, number 4 is something you've probably heard, and that is a false start. Also going along with that is a prologue. Most agents, editors are going to tell you to skip the prologue. 9 times out of 10, you don't need it, and there is a better way to do it. But I'm going to call it a false start because it doesn't matter how you label it, it's the same thing. If your first chapter is not representative of the rest of your manuscript, scrap it. Do it a different way. That may mean your first chapter is set in a different place or a different time, or it has a different point of view character, or it's a dream. Don't try to trick your reader, okay? They are opening this book and they're going through the first pages trying to get a feel for what's going on. Am I going to enjoy this? And if they turn to chapter 2 and suddenly they feel like they're in a different book after they have spent, a little bit of time getting invested in these first pages, they're probably going to put it down. So if you have a false start, really look at it. Really separate yourself, try to be objective, and think of it from the perspective of an unfamiliar reader. If you were picking this book up for the first time, you didn't know anything about it, you didn't know the characters, you didn't know where the plot was heading, what would you do? Would you keep reading or would you put it down? And this is also where beta readers come in handy. When you send your manuscript to betas and they give you feedback, listen to that advice. Of course, it's your manuscript and you have to do what's best for it. Betas don't know everything, so don't take it as the be-all end-all. But if you send it to 10 betas and 8 of them tell you they would stop reading after the first chapter because of your false start, reconsider that. Okay, and number 5 is kind of similar, not orienting the reader. I would say a false start is orienting the reader in the wrong way. But sometimes we don't orient the reader at all. We don't let them know where they are, when they are, who they're with. If you have floating heads, if you have dialogue that does not have action attached to it, that is a really, really good sign that you are not orienting the reader. And of course, we do not want to fall into the trap of feeling like this is an excuse to dump a bunch of exposition. You may think, okay, so you're telling me orient the reader and make sure they know where, when they are, what's going on. So that means I need to give them a bunch of information and make sure they understand everything. No, that's not what I'm saying. You don't need to make sure they understand everything. You definitely don't need to dump a bunch of exposition, but you do need to make sure that they have a basic sense of where they are. Think of it like this. You have just dropped the reader into an unknown land. You have dropped them into their story and they have no idea what's going on. So if you're the reader, you're standing up, you're dusting yourself off, you're looking around, you're trying to get an idea for where you are and what's going to happen next. You're listening. The best thing that you can do to orient the reader is think about your senses. Think about sensory details and think about a stranger dropped into this scene. What would they need to know for it to make sense? So this is part of the fine line that we're always walking as writers. We want to give enough information to make the scene make sense and help the reader understand what's happening, but we don't want to dump exposition and we don't want to give too much information so that we remove that tension of the reader wondering what's going to happen next. So it's a fine line, it is a balance. We do the best we can, and that is why we keep refining, keep polishing through editing. Okay, that's all I've got for you today. Those are 5 things that I see commonly in the first few pages in the first chapter of manuscripts that I am editing. I hope this helps you avoid some common pitfalls with your manuscript, whether you are editing or submitting to agents, editors. Again, don't forget to look out for those 10 queries tweets on February 15th. That's this Friday. And I will be back soon with more writing and editing videos. Of course, look out for my crazy dog in those videos. He likes to make appearances. And don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see y'all next time.